I took these ideas and I really applied it to my own situation and realized that, like, when I started dieting, I really sent my primal brain into like a survival reaction, that it was trying to protect me. And I mentioned that a little bit earlier, that food just became suddenly the most important thing and the only thing I could think about. And it wasn't because I was trying to cope with life. It was because I was trying to not starve. I mean, my body was starving.
2, 1, 0.
Hi, and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. This is your host, Orion. Thank you so much for being here. And if you are here, you are very much interested in your relationship with food, or healing your relationship with food, or helping someone that you love deal with their relationship with food, because food disorders are very common. They actually affect 9% of the world's population, and in my eyes, much more than that, because there's so many levels, and there's so many, especially women, that struggle with body image, and that leads to some awkward relationship with food. I know I've been on many diets in my life. I don't know how many you tried, but I tried so many, and my weight is up and down and all around, and I just learned to accept that my body is ever changing. It might not stay the ideal that I think it should be. I mean, what is the ideal of beauty? Ideal of beauty changes throughout times and seasons and location. Like, where you are in the world really affect how beautiful you are considered, or what is the perfect body shape. So we have a lot of interesting stories in our minds around food, and those stories, the beliefs, hurts, past pains, whatever it is, can cause one to have a really bad relationship with food. So I invited Kathryn Hansen. Kathryn recovered from bulimia in 2005, and since then she has been dedicated to educating and empowering people who struggle with all forms of binge eating. She's the author of Brain Over Binge Recovery Guide and the host of Brain Over Binge Podcast. And in this conversation, Kathryn shares how she handles her binge eating tendencies and how people can start dealing with theirs without having to sacrifice or struggle. I hope this will help you find peace and set you on a very healthy journey of healing. And now, without further ado, on to the show. Hello, Kathryn. Thank you so much for being here, and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. I'm very happy that you're here with us, because I'm sure that whatever you're going to share today is going to help so many people. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here with you today.
Yeah. Before we begin, can you share a little bit about yourself and your passion, and how did you even get to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, my story is that I'm a recovered binge eater, bulimic, recovered about 17 years ago, over 17 years ago now. And after I recovered, I just had a strong desire to help people. And it started just with me writing my own story. It took a really long time. I finally published my first book, Brain Over Binge, in 2011. And I just published an updated version, actually, a second edition. And I wrote a second book, the Brain Over Binge Recovery Guide. And it's just really been my mission through these past 17 years since I've been recovered to share a message of hope, to share a message that you can overcome this, and it doesn't have to be so complicated. I really share an alternative approach, a brain-based approach that helps people just use the power of their own brain to overcome the binge eating habit.
And what's the difference between the first book and the second book?
The first book is really my story. Brain Over Binge is, although you can use it to kind of have your own insights and look at your issue in a new way, it is my story. I take you through what I struggled with, my unsuccessful therapy, and then how I eventually recovered. The second book is a self-help book where it like guides you through how to make these brain-based concepts that I talk about in the first book that helped me, kind of how to make that work in your own life, because everyone is different. No one's recovery is going to look exactly like mine. So that was really the reason to write another book.
So let's start with the first one. So how did it start that you started binge eating?
Yeah, I mean, I was in high school, and like many high school girls do, like started becoming self-conscious about my body, started feeling like I was putting on weight, and as I should have, as a normal teenage girl does. And a lot of my friends were dieting, but for me it wasn't this conscious decision. I ended up having a tonsillectomy, and I lost a bunch of weight just from not being able to eat. And then I decided, oh, this solves the problem of me worrying about my weight. Now so I never really went back to normal eating after that. Then I started purposefully restricting calories. I never really resumed a normal diet after that. I sort of became obsessed with it. I had that classic perfectionistic personality, and just really became a compulsion to focus on my food, to try to eat as little as possible. And then that lasted about 2 years, a little less than 2 years. I really became severely underweight. But then I started getting out of control as far as like the food cravings, which is all very normal. It's the way the body tries to protect you. It's the way your like what I call in my book, the primal brain or the lower brain tries to get you to survive by really making food the most important thing that you think about. And eventually I was overcome by my first urges to binge. I ate in an out of control way. It really felt like I couldn't control what I was putting in my mouth. It felt sort of like an out of body experience. I was like, oh my gosh, what have I done? So that happened during my senior year of high school. And then from there, it just really became, I guess, self-perpetuating. I would try to compensate by purging, then, go back to restricting, and then binge again and again and again. And I couldn't really see why it was happening. And it went on for 6 years with the binging before I finally recovered.
Wow. So what kind of therapies did you try, and what did people tell you that is the cause for what you're experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, I started therapy basically in college. I kind of dabbled in it a little bit in high school, but really my therapy started in college. And I explain a lot of this in my book in greater detail, but I'll briefly say that a lot of therapy is based on the concept that an eating disorder, and especially binge eating, is a way that you're trying to cope with something. They told me that there must be something sort of in my past or in my emotions, or something to do with anxiety or depression, or something I was supposedly using food to try to soothe myself, or to try to avoid emotions, or to try to cover up something I couldn't face in my life. So it really became this mystery to try to fix myself, to try to find what was wrong, and learn to deal with depression, learn to cope with anxiety, learn to look at my past and heal whatever was there. And none of it worked as far as the binging. Sure, I learned some good lessons about coping, and I learned some good things about dealing with emotions, but none of it really turned off that strong desire to eat massive amounts of food. So,
Right.
it was a mix of psychodynamic therapy and a little bit of cognitive behavioral therapy. Also
Right.
saw a nutritionist, and it just, my therapists were great and well-meaning, but it didn't really help me stop the binging.
Right. And then you keep feeling like something's wrong with me, and I'm unfixable.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
for
And
sure. I mean, that seemed to be the message, is like you're broken. Whereas what I eventually learned and realized was that, gosh, I just was food deprived. I wasn't eating enough. My body was trying to protect me. I started binging. It became a habit. And then I was told, okay, you're doing it for all these deep reasons. And I think in a lot of ways that just solidified the habit even more.
oh wow. Oh, that's wow. That's awful. So what happened? Like, how did you? Was it just like you woke up one night with a aha moment and figure it out, or how did you figure out how to help yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. It wasn't, I mean, it was kind of quick as far as my recovery, but there's a little bit of a backstory, which I'll try to be brief about. I
Don't be
spent a
brief. I
long
want to know
time.
everything.
Don't be brief. Okay, I'll tell it all. So
Just say it.
it's funny because my book is like over 300 pages, and people are like, tell me your story. I'm like, Okay, how do I summarize 300 pages into? But so basically, I had gone the therapy path for a long time, like just thinking maybe there was just more I needed to solve, more things I need to find in my past, more. I just never felt like. I felt like if I could finally heal myself, if I could finally become happy, if I could finally be satisfied in my relationships or whatever, then this feeling of a need to binge would go away. And it just never did. And I eventually started this medication, and like it switched off the urges. Now, that wasn't the cure. I don't want anyone thinking that was the cure for me personally. Like the urges came back. It eventually didn't work. But for a couple months, the urges just went away, like the urges to eat these massive amounts of food. And it was such a weird experience because I was like, wow, all my other problems are still here. Like everything my therapist told me I wasn't able to cope with, or like all my personality traits that set me up for this, my perfectionism, anxiety, things like that, that's all still here, but I'm not binging. Like I don't have this urge to eat massive amounts of food. So that really made me take a step back from therapy and made me like, okay, that's not the path for me, because I couldn't buy into it anymore after I had seen that I could have problems like anyone else in the world and not binge. Once I saw that and experienced that, there was no way I was going back down that path again.
This is so mind blowing. This is so like, in the world of self-development and therapy and all that, it is like in a way, and I love that you're pointing that out, that some people start feeling like they're broken because, you know, we have to fix something for you from your childhood in order for you to move forward. And in many cases it is like it gives them aha moments and it helps. And even I do hypnotherapy, so even with my clients it helps. But it's a fine line between like maybe it is physical, maybe it is like just as simple as making a decision, or using those brain tools that you talk about in your second book. There is no one truth, there is no one way. So even me as a coach and a hypnotherapist listening to you, I'm like, wow, this is such a powerful point and so true. And I'm so happy that you're shedding light on this.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And everyone has a different path. And like I mentioned in the beginning, like my story is not going to be everyone's story, and everyone has different things they may feel like they need to do. But I feel like at some point, if you go down that path for long enough and like the habit is not changing and your behaviors are not changing, then
Yeah,
it's
gotta
kind of
look
time to look for some other solutions.
right.
So what I was saying was that the medicine like stopped working, in that my urges came back. Also, I had side effects from it. Like the doctors had said, "Oh, you can just increase your dose," but I was having side effects. It wasn't making me feel like normal, like myself. So I stopped the medicine, but then I never went back to therapy. And it was only, I forgot exactly how many months, but it was in months later, like maybe 3 to 6 months, I came across a book called Rational Recovery by Jack
Mm.
Trimpey. And it's an older book. I mean, written in the 80s for sure, maybe late 80s. And it was an alternative at the time to Alcoholics Anonymous. It was a book about alcohol and drug addiction. And he basically argued against the disease concept, that's what he called it, of addiction. He was arguing that, addiction is basically a habit of the primitive brain. We all have what he calls a beast brain inside of us. I call it a lower brain, a primal brain. That's just really
Lizard brain.
instinctual. Lizard brain. It's instinctual. It's driven by pleasure. It's driven by avoiding pain. It's driven by reward. It's driven by habit and instinct. And what happened is, like, I took these ideas and I really applied it to my own situation and realized that, like, when I started dieting, I really sent my primal brain into like a survival reaction, that it was trying to protect me. And I mentioned that a little bit earlier, that food just became suddenly the most important thing and the only thing I could think about. And it wasn't because I was trying to cope with life, it was because I was trying to not starve. I mean, my body
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
starving.
You were completely
So,
depleted.
yeah, and even people who don't develop full blown binge eating, if they've ever been on a diet, you can probably relate to that. Like, everything seems kind of normal, and then you start cutting back on your food, and that's all you can think about is eating. And some people are just more prone, for whatever reason, to develop like full blown urges to binge. And the statistics say like upwards of 50% of anorexics eventually do become bulimic because your
Wow.
body fights back. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's pretty common. Like what I went through wasn't something like abnormal. It's all sort of understandable in the way our brain works and tries to protect us. But then when someone binges, if anyone out there listening has binged, you feel so guilty. You feel so shameful. You feel like, oh my gosh, I have to do something about this, because you felt so out of control that when you get control back, that's when the purging comes in. And I had tried to self-induce vomiting and thankfully was never able to. So I
Oh,
did exercise.
that's like I can never vomit on my own. Like I tried, like ugh. Even when I was sick and I was trying to vomit, it was like I can't do it. Thank God.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And it's most people think that, like, wow, I can't believe people do this. But when you're in that desperate state of after a binge and you feel like, oh my gosh, I have to undo this, it seems like a solution. And it's a very dangerous thing. It's not a solution at all.
Hmm.
So thankfully I wasn't able to, but I turned to like hours and hours of exercise. So I would binge, and then the next day I would purge, and my purging got up to maybe like 7 hours of exercise the day
My
after a
goodness.
binges. And it
Wow.
was terrible. Like it consumed my entire life.
And then you go to the gym. It's such a vicious cycle. You go to the gym, 7 hours of like depleting your nutrients, electrolytes, your everything, and then you're oh so tired, and you're so depleted, so you just go binge again, and you go and it's oh my God, that's horrible.
Yeah, and the exercising just perpetuates the cycle because you're telling your body, okay, you're deprived again. Let's
Wow.
keep
Yes.
sending out those urges. And then I think like that drives the cycle as far as the deprivation and then your body trying to protect you, but then it eventually just becomes a habit where like the binging is, and I hate to use the word pleasure, but it starts to feel rewarding in some way. It starts to feel like something you want to do. It starts to feel
Like a
like something
friend,
that you
familiar,
need. Yeah. Like someone who starts smoking
soothing.
like without thinking that it's gross, and then suddenly they think it's the most appealing thing in the world,
Right.
until they quit, and then they think it's gross again. Like it starts to become appealing. That's the brain's job, to maintain habits, to make the behaviors it thinks is necessary, like to make those behaviors seem appealing.
Hmm.
So it eventually felt like what I called a conditioned need. It's a need that's not a real need, but you're conditioned to, like, for your body to feel like it's a need. So that's the habit part of it. And I think if you don't understand what's going on in the brain, it can just feel like you don't have a choice. And I think what the book Rational Recovery gave me was the ability to start choosing again.
So what did he say there that was gave you that aha moment? What is that thing that made you feel like, oh, this is very different and now I can take control over my life?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't like just one line. It was kind of a whole perspective change. Like, I really stopped believing that there was any deeper reason for me doing
Okay.
what I was doing. I stopped believing it was a coping mechanism. I kind of stopped believing that it was pleasurable. Like, my brain made me think it was, but I stopped believing my brain when it was tell
Oh,
me that. Um, I stopped thinking that, basically, stopped thinking that it helped me in any way. I like just separated myself from it. He separates the brain into like your beast brain and then your human brain, which he calls the I and the it. So it was like I realized that I was separate from this primal instinct, this primal habit that was going on in the lower brain. So it was like suddenly capturing my power not to be overrun by this. And he also explained that you and your prefrontal cortex, your higher brain, and at the time, I don't even think he used the term prefrontal cortex, but as time has gone by and we've learned more about neuroscience, that's the part of you that gives you the ability to have self control, to be able to veto instincts, to be able to veto these things you don't want to do. I mean, we all have things that we don't want to do that our
mm-hmm.
brain kind of makes us think are appealing,
Mm-hmm.
and we have the ability to say no. So it's like it was capturing that ability to say no in the face of a really strong habit.
Wow. So it took you out of um it's almost like you were a victim of your situation and you were broken, and there is always a new thing that needs to be healed in order for you to get over this situation. But now when you read this book, you're like, wait, I'm whole, I'm complete, and this is a habit and I do it for pleasure and I own it because I do it because it's fun in a way, because it makes me feel good. So I'm choosing, I'm owning, and from a place of ownership, the shift happens.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And not even so much that I'm doing this for fun. It's like I'm doing this because my brain is telling me
Yeah,
that
well,
it's fun,
fun,
but I know,
yeah,
yeah, like I know it's not, and really realizing that it wasn't me. Like
right,
this wasn't who I was. This
nice.
wasn't what I wanted to choose. This is what I felt compelled to do because of these forces in the reward center, or you could call it the limbic system, or
Yeah,
whatever was driving this habit was apart from me. And the only reason I was, this is another important thing I think as far as reframing it was, my therapist always told me I was binging to cope with something, like emotions, problems, things like that. But I realized that I was only binging to cope with the urges to binge, because
nice.
when those urges came up, they were so uncomfortable. They made me feel like so much desire, so much anxiety, so much like, oh my gosh, you have to do this, that I was binging just sort of to make those urges go away at some point. Like there
Mhm.
wasn't even though my brain told me it would be fun, I think I knew it wouldn't be, but it was just to make that urge, to make those urges stop. I felt like there was nothing else I could do to make them go away.
Even if it will make you feel not fun. Fun was not the right word, but it will make you feel normal or okay.
Yeah, like the
Yeah,
urges will go away. But then
yeah,
once I was able to step back from those urges and realize, okay, like they're not going to hurt me. They're not, these urges aren't me. This isn't what I truly want. I could be with those urges from a more detached perspective. I could sort of observe the urges. I
mhm,
could experience the urges without letting them get me so upset, without feeling like I had to make them go
yeah.
away. And once like I realized, okay, I don't have to make these urges go away, and they can be here while I do whatever I need to do in life, it was easier to ride them out, and then, eventually the habit just deconditions.
Um, so tell me a little bit about what reactions you got to that book and how it helped people heal. Like, what are some of your most memorable stories?
Yeah, I definitely, like when I wrote the first book, I self published it. I didn't think anyone would read it. I mean, I did. I hope people would read it, but I
Mhm.
thought maybe if one person reads this, that will be enough. That's my goal will be accomplished. And I started just shipping the books out from my own house. I had a website. I printed boxes of books. I would pack them up myself in the early days, and I remember like getting my first email, or my first several emails from people saying, oh my gosh, this helped me so much. And it was, gosh, it was wonderful. I'm
Mhm.
like, oh wow, like I'm actually helping people. And then everything kind of grew from there. Amazon became a bigger thing, as we all know, and the book started being available on Amazon. And then I started having more and more people contact me. And a really, my favorite thing about my second, not the second book, but the second edition of Brain Over Binge was my story, but then I added a last, final chapter, which is the recovery stories of other people who have,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
who like agreed to contribute their story. And yeah, I just thought that was really powerful as far as showing people that there are different paths. I mean, I basically stopped the day after reading Rational Recovery. I had maybe two more binges after that, but not everyone has that same experience. So I think it was great to incorporate the stories of people whose recovery looked different than mine.
Nice. Uh, can you share a story, for example?
Well, actually, I can do better than that on my podcast. Some of the people have been coming on the podcast. So if you go to
Mm.
the Brain Over Binge podcast, you can actually hear the people. It's episode 101 through 104, and then I have a couple more coming out. So you can actually go listen to them. But yeah, I'm trying to think of one. Actually, I was editing one today. A woman recovered after 38 years. So it's just
Wow.
amazing to hear her story, and just always thinking like me, like something's wrong with me, always stuck in dieting, and just to eventually start nourishing her body, start eating enough, start realizing that her weight can just regulate itself, and just to be free to live her life and to discover what she's interested in.
Mhm.
And I just thought, yeah, I mean, they're all great stories as well. And I have a coach working for me now too, who's helping women with these, using these brain-based concepts and implementing it in her own life. Her name is Coach Julie, and her story's on there. She's episode 101. So they're really just all very inspiring.
What are some of the brain over binge techniques that you use?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I basically have 5 components that sort of summarize what you can do to change your perspective when the urges come up, when the urges are there, to not feel so compelled to act on them. And I used to call them steps, but it's really like components. It's really, they all come together to help you see your urges in a new way. And the first one is to view your urges as neurological junk. And that just means you see them as a brain glitch. You see them as something that's not you. You see them as basically meaningless and powerless and harmless. And they're just junk from your brain. So that's the first one. The second one is to separate yourself from the urges to binge. And that's what I talked about, basically, that you realize that those urges are not you. You realize that you're much more than that. You realize that the urges are not expressing your true wants or your true needs. The third is to stop reacting to the urges, and that is to stop reacting emotionally, to stop getting upset at them, to stop getting frustrated that they're not going away, to really just be as unemotional as possible when the urges come up. I don't know if you have any questions. I feel like I'm going on and on. Do you want me to go to the next one?
No, yeah, before you go to the next one, I have a question. When you're in the heat of the moment, and I'm talking about, it can be binge eating, you can put anything prior to those techniques, for those techniques. In that moment, the heat of the moment where your brain is hijacked, whether it can be hormonal or emotional or whatever it is, how do you how do you actually go into your left logical brain when you're so emotional and be like, oh, that's not me, I'm a separate identity, now I'm not doing it. But in the moment, like, you see red, or you feel very intense emotions.
Yeah, I think those moments are definitely the most difficult. I mean, I think for binging, they're giving yourself just that little extra time and space. Like, if you can even commit to yourself to not binge for like 2 minutes and to not start the behavior, and just to give yourself that space to calm down a little bit, then you can connect.
Go to the bathroom and breathe, lock yourself and breathe.
Yeah, I mean, those kind of things, are just focus on.
You can do a pattern interrupt and just like put a lot of water on your face, just like ice
I
water.
mean, any of those things could work. Any of those things that like you feel like pull you out of that state could work. And then you connect back with your higher brain, and you can remember that, okay, I know what's going on here. It's not a surprise. This is just how I've taught my brain. And also, that actually brings me to the fourth component, which is kind of obvious, but it's to stop acting on the urges. And I think in those moments that you're just feeling like that, just focusing on not acting is so important. Like, you may not be able to convince yourself that it's just your lower brain, or you may not be able to convince yourself that, you're separate. You may totally feel in it, but if you can convince yourself to not act just in those moments, then you come back and you realize, oh wow, I'm so glad I didn't do that. I don't think anyone's ever binged and thought, oh, I'm so glad I binged. Like, you're always so glad you didn't act. So if you can get through those moments, not act, and really celebrate, which is the fifth component, to celebrate your success, then it just solidifies the change. And once you do this over and over, then your brain does change. I mean, we know this through the science of neuroscience, through neuroplasticity. I mean, our brains hold that ability to erase habits. And when you don't act on the compulsions, the brain stops producing those compulsions.
Nice. Did your body image changed since you stopped binging?
Body image? Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, my binging brought my body weight like well over my natural weight. So there was a lot of shame involved in that, because it was just, I was living in a body that I felt like wasn't really mine. And like, I had a hard time. My therapist would tell me, oh, you need to learn to love your body in order to stop binging. But I just felt like it was impossible almost to love my body during that time. And, I don't even know if loving your body is necessary to have a full life. Like, you can have a perfectly full life and take care of yourself without feeling like, oh, I'm so happy about the way I look. I mean, I just don't think it's that important. Definitely feel like it's important to take care of yourself. But I think there may be too much emphasis placed on that is in the eating disorder field, is like, oh, you have to love your body and love your body. And for some people, it's kind of feels like an unattainable thing. But I think it's important to accept your natural weight, whatever your weight is, when you're nourishing yourself, when you're eating in a way that works for you and your body. Everyone's body shows up in a different way, and to learn to accept the way your body naturally shows up, I think is really important. So that was much easier for me to do once I stopped binging because my body did regulate. Like I did gradually lose the weight I had gained from binging. Never dieted ever again. I just, feed my body. I eat enough. I eat, a lot, and I mean a lot like normal, and just accept the way I am.
Nice. I like it. I like accepting, but I also like loving.
Yeah.
Um, I
Maybe I'm
also,
just more, yeah.
yeah, I also
I
like
think,
loving.
yeah.
Yeah, I think the next step is loving yourself, just the way you are, and it comes from radical acceptance. Yeah, one of the things that I teach people is about self-love and loving themselves, and this is because I'm doing it for myself. I had to learn it for myself from a place of really not liking myself, and then relearn it again and relearn it again, and I probably have to relearn it again. But from my point of view, like when you are in deep acceptance and self-love, life is just easier, and you feel more happy from the inside, more sensual, you're more actually more loving toward other people when you are in a place of like I'm good now, and my cup is full, so I can share some with you. Um, and I had this experience recently. 3 weeks ago, I went to Costa Rica and I took a photo shoot. I did a photo shoot with this amazing photographer. And but all like the 3 months leading to the photo shoot, I was uh, I was dieting a little bit and really searching for my new identity or identities as a person because it really changed after being a mom, going through a C-section, having all those body changes. And so for me, it was when I went there, I was like, oh, okay, the photos are probably okay. But then I got them and I'm like, whoa, the way I think about myself and the way I see are not aligned. Actually, they looked gorgeous and amazing, and it was, and I'm so happy to that I did that for myself, so I can see myself as greater than I am, as beautiful, as glamorous as I want to be, and and also what I loved about my photo shoot and is that it's not only smiley faces. I don't smile. Some of them are sad, some of them are shy, some of them are raging, some of them are arrogant. It's like really embodying different archetypes of the feminine and accepting all of them and loving all of them and seeing how different they are. I feel like self-love or body love, it goes deeper than the physical. It goes into loving your emotions and loving your flaws and accepting, that you are not broken. And there is nothing broken in being emotional. There is nothing broken in being enraged or like it's all, it can be a teacher or it can be something that brings you down. And I don't know. I just felt like something clicked there. And on another level, hanging out with some people from Costa Rica, what I really love about their culture is they really don't care about what you look like. It's really like it's almost like an illusion, or sometimes I'll call it even a sickness of living here and in the U.S. and other Western countries. Sorry, is that the right way to say it? Western countries. Okay, good. Um, so just seeing how people are in full acceptance of who they are and who you are just because you are. My makeup artist never wears makeup. She just loves makeup. It's art for her. But she never wears makeup. She puts feathers in her hair, and she lives on a farm with horses and whatever animals. And her kids grow up to to appreciate friendships and hanging out with people and being outdoors more than Instagram and the way we look and what makeup we wear. Um, so I feel like in my journey to embrace who I am, I help other embrace who they are as well. Do you feel the same about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all everything you said was wonderful and much needed. I mean, I think people need to be talking about this, and self acceptance is a wonderful thing. And when I teach that, okay, it's not necessary, like, okay, it's not necessary to overcome an eating disorder. I don't think that, because I think that can keep people trapped to think, oh, I have to develop this self love before
Mm,
I can stop this habit that's really
yeah,
harming me, that's really making me not love
yeah,
myself.
yeah.
I
That
really
can be
think
an
we have it a little backwards.
yes,
Yeah. But
yeah,
once people do stop the behaviors, and I'm not saying you can't work on both at the same time. Like, sure, if you can work on self love and stopping an eating disorder at the same time, and that works for you, then wonderful. I mean, the more self love, the better. But at least in my case, and a lot of people I work with, it seems so impossible. And
mm-hmm.
as you know, self love and acceptance is a lifelong journey. And if you
Yes,
think
it
you have
is.
to get to some, yeah, like if you think you have to get to some point of self love, of like this ideal version of acceptance or whatever to stop a habit, then I think it can perpetuate the
Right.
habit. So
Yes.
I hope that's making sense, that it's not like I'm against self love. It's just that,
Absolutely. No, no, I feel like we're totally aligned on that. They're both very important, and like I said, it was a very refreshing point of view of, sometimes you just have to go to the habit, to the behavior, and just stop it. What are So when you stop the habit of binging, did it affect stopping other habits of in your life, other negative habits?
I think it brought me a long way toward just improving my life in so many ways. I mean, I had tried so long in therapy to really improve different areas of myself and my life. And with the binging going on, it was so hard to do any of that. So once it stopped, it just really naturally allowed me to focus on improving myself in other ways. Like it wasn't that I tried to force myself to. It was like, wow, I have all this mental energy back. I have all this time back. I'm not spending it, 7 hours in the gym every other day. I'm not spending hours and hours getting food and consuming it. So there was all this time and all this energy and all this space to like create a life suddenly. And it was super exciting. So I think that's something
Yeah.
people can hold on to and look forward to, that, gosh, you're going to get your life back. And then you can do whatever you want with it. And that's, growing your self love, learning what, you want to focus on and what you enjoy and what fills you up.
If you look back on your journey, would you change any of it?
Hmm. That's a good question. I mean, no, just because like seeing, what I went through was able to help other people, then I'm really glad I went through it. I mean, yeah, for a while I felt regret about the wasted years, and gosh, I wasted all these like years of my young life that I wish I had. But I mean, that's all really gone away. I thought about that a little while after I recovered, but then eventually you just move on with your life and you appreciate that you still have time left and you can reach out to help others. You can
Mm,
help others avoid wasting that time. So no, I don't think I would
yeah,
change anything.
nice. It seems like you're very much a giver. Even when you wrote your book, the idea of I'm gonna just help one person, it seems very like very pure, and I think coming from that place is what gravitates people toward you and what they can learn from you. It's being you come across as very genuine, very real. Like this is who I am, this is what I've been through, and your intentions are very pure. So I really appreciate that.
I appreciate it. And I like when I wanted to write the book was actually like in the depths of my bulimia. And I wrote this in my book that I was always a writer. I like to write. It was always like my strongest subject. I was never a good speaker. Like these interviews are a
Hmm.
stretch for me. I was always like just better at writing. So I told myself like if I ever find a way out, I'm going to write a book about it. And I promised this to myself when I was in the thick of my problem. So like when I eventually recovered, and my recovery was so different than I thought it would be. I mean, I really thought my book would be about me transforming and suddenly having all this self love and suddenly being able to cope with my life really well. I thought that would be my story because that's what I thought was necessary. So when I recovered in a way that was like, okay, I stopped binging, but I'm still kind of a mess. Like I felt like I had to share that. I mean, I felt like, gosh, just get rid of the habit and it's okay. You can deal with your other problems. Like you don't have to fix everything. So the fact that my recovery was like unconventional, I think really motivated me even more. And I thought, gosh, like you said, if I could just get this to one person, and it just kind of spread from there. So I'm very happy that I could be
Right.
that voice of sort of that alternative voice. It was a little scary at first to be that, to speak out against traditional treatments and stuff, but I feel like it's been worth it.
Right. And do you have any other ways that you change habits in your life?
Like my own habits.
Yeah.
For sure. I think that this, like learning that the fundamental idea that all of your thoughts aren't true and all of your emotions don't need to be given so much significance, I think that's transformed my life in a lot of ways.
Yeah, we take ourselves so seriously.
Yeah,
I like that.
for sure. I mean, once you realize that, then that you can sort of choose which thoughts you're going to believe and which that are just kind of junk from your brain. I mean, it goes way beyond eating, it goes to everything in your life. And I'm definitely not
Do
perfect
you
at it.
journal?
Journal.
Yeah.
I haven't really, like we were just talking about, I have 4 kids and they're finally at the age now where like I have a little spare time, but I don't do a lot of journaling, no.
Do you have any ritual that you do in the morning or during the day, or how do you ground yourself and prepare yourself to handle your career, your life, your kids? What do you do to help yourself ground?
Um, I guess the biggest thing I try to, because I am busy and I typically don't like spend time in silence and peace, but I like to listen to things like podcast, motivational things, life coaching stuff through podcast or audiobook. So like I'll have earphones in my ear when I'm doing the dishes or laundry, and I feel like that helps ground me because otherwise it's easy to get wrapped up in your own thoughts and feel resentful about everything you have to do. But like if you can focus on the bigger picture, if you can focus on, just get a bigger perspective, I think it helps me feel more grounded.
Um, yeah, I love it. Um, Looking at yourself from the place of the witness. I don't know where I heard that. On one of the million things I studied, but it's like you absorb yourself from the outside. I, yeah. Um, and I think it it takes some practice to do that. It's like a muscle. You can't do it in a minute. You have to practice a few times until you kind of get into the habit of breaking your habit. It takes time, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think that,
Yeah.
and we all, like, even if you do have awareness and you do realize that not all your thoughts should be taken seriously, we all get caught up in it. I mean, I still get caught up in anxiety thoughts
I
and,
never get caught up
oh,
in
yeah.
it. Never.
Yeah.
Never. Me? Nah.
I know. It's so, no matter how much you still can get caught up in it. And that's why when people first learn this and about binging and they're like, oh my gosh, I followed an urge and I binged. It's like you just followed one urge. You just temporarily didn't realize what was going on. You didn't separate. And it just can take some practice. So, but then those urges, I think, go away. And that doesn't mean you won't have problems in your life. That doesn't mean you won't struggle with other thoughts. But I do think like the urges to perform a specific habit, they go away. I mean, anyone who's ever smoked or who's ever quit a habit, you realize this, that it's not like you spend your whole life having these desires for something you can't do anymore. It's like you
Yeah.
look at it as the opposite of pleasure.
Yeah. And the way you said it was just brought the word compassion. You got to be very compassionate with yourself. One of my mentors, Dr. DeMartini, said, "Whatever you did or didn't do, you're worthy of love." So I think the first person that should take care of you and be compassionate toward you is you. So even when you tried and you failed and you made a mistake, just keep doing it. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. Look for the help. Look for what's working with you. Listen inside. Open your mind to whatever is your truth. Not everybody else's truth, your truth. And from there you can achieve whatever you want.
I agree with that. And I think
Yeah.
that's what adds so much to this approach. Having, like I mentioned, we have a coach, Coach Julie, who's working with people one-on-one and helping them have that self-compassion and helping them also in a group as well, but helping people like see that, gosh, if you binge, like it doesn't mean all is lost. You just keep going, you keep moving forward until you learn it, until you overcome it, and you look at the specific challenges you're facing, and you don't think, oh my gosh, everything's a mess. You zero in, okay, what specifically am I struggling with? And for a lot of people, it's the eating part. Like some people don't want to give up dieting, so it's a lot of like, making them realize it's okay to nourish your body. You need to nourish your body because it's so important in binging. Like, yeah, you can stop the binging, but like that's not going to work for very long if you're not eating enough because it's just going to come back. So it's really the two components of like eating enough and then also learning to not act on the urges. And when you do both of those things, you erase the habit.
Cool. What are your 3 top tips to living a stellar life?
It's a good question. I think one of them would have to be what I said earlier, like not all your thoughts are your own and that you are empowered to choose which ones you're going to believe. Second, I think just own your own truth and don't feel like you have to copy what other people are doing, like be yourself type of thing. And 3, I don't know. I can only think of 2 right now.
That's good. Those are wonderful.
Okay. Thank you. 3, don't go on a diet.
Okay.
And that's, I understand some people need to eat certain ways for certain reasons and health and all that, those things. And I never want to discourage health, but I think it's so important not to deprive your body in the aim of losing weight and to really put yourself in that starvation state. It just creates a lot of problems. So just nourish yourself would be my 3rd tip.
Nice, nice. So, Kathryn, before we say goodbye, can you share a little bit about your website? Where can people find you? Where can they can find you on social media and all the good stuff?
Sure. Yeah, my website is brainoverbinge.com, and there you get like my podcast, my blog, the coaching I talked about, one-on-one coaching, group coaching. You can learn about my books. My books are also on Amazon. I also have an online course that's self-paced. That's also at brainoverbinge.com. And anyone who's new to this approach, I do have a free ebook on brainoverbinge.com where you can just sign up and you can download a 30-page guide that sort of brings you all the basics of this approach to see if it's right for you. So hopefully that will give you a place to start.
That's wonderful. Oh, thank you so much for this conversation, and thank you so much for helping so many people by being true to who you are.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you, listeners. Remember to be empowered, to choose your own thoughts, and to nourish your body. This is Orion. Till next time.